Dear esteemed viewers, before we proceed, it is crucial to note that this segment of the documentary, and the ones to follow, contains striking propositions and an overview of several covert projects. We have arranged these in a sequence that reveals how they are interlinked and mutually reinforcing, all serving a singular agenda and leading toward a fundamental objective. As always, all references can be found in the video description for those who wish to dive deeper into this intricate and controversial topic. We highly recommend watching to the end, as the narrative is carefully layered and cumulative. Amid the rapid global transformations, political, economic, cultural, and technological, a discerning eye cannot fail to notice the escalating pattern of collective mental conditioning. To those with awakened hearts, this orchestration is anything but random. It is, in fact, part of a global scheme aimed primarily at dismantling belief systems and reconfiguring spiritual and religious concepts. It seems we are either asleep, sedated, or blindly drifting through life. Yet despite this, there is no denying the emergence of a global awakening, especially over the past 2 decades. The number of those awakening, or at least desiring to awaken, is steadily growing day after day. The very fact that you are watching this now, eager to see it through, is proof of that awakening within you. In the previous 2 parts, we explored how the global elite succeeded in monopolizing revolutionary technologies, which they subsequently concealed, rendering them forbidden knowledge known only to the ruling few. Through this monopoly, these elites have employed such technologies in clandestine operations far removed from any form of oversight. These secret undertakings serve aims far beyond economic or military dominance. Their deeper ambition lies in reshaping the world according to a singular vision, through the imposition of new systems of social control, the creation of an alternative reality driven by artificial intelligence, comprehensive surveillance, and the manipulation of public opinion through media and cognitive influence. The first of these projects is MKUltra. Arguably one of the most infamous and controversial programs, and one of the few officially acknowledged efforts to manipulate and control the human mind. The project was officially launched in the early 1950s, in the aftermath of World War II. As the Cold War began to take shape between the United States and the Soviet Union, fears grew over the possibility that the Soviets were developing mind control or brainwashing techniques. A set of psychological and chemical methods applied on individuals or groups to manipulate thoughts and behaviors, coercing subjects into making decisions or adopting beliefs against their will. In response to such fears, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, initiated a secret program to develop mind control techniques for use in interrogations, psychological warfare, brainwashing, behavioral control, and even subliminal political persuasion. Under the guise of scientific research, American chemist and psychiatrist Sidney Gottlieb led a team of scientists who conducted dozens of experiments on prisoners, psychiatric patients, soldiers, and even unsuspecting civilians. Subjects were injected with various chemical compounds, chief among them lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD, and administered sedatives to weaken mental resistance. Hypnosis, electroshock therapy, and sensory deprivation were used to plant hidden suggestions in their minds. Victims were often confined in isolated rooms, deprived of sleep, or subjected to repetitive loud noises designed to shatter their will. The goal was to study the mind's breaking point and to develop tools for manipulating perception, extracting information, and controlling consciousness. Despite the brutality of the experiments, the project's true horror lay in the fact that most, if not all, participants were unaware they were being subjected to such trials. These experiments were carried out in hospitals and universities across the United States and Canada, without informed consent, causing severe psychological damage to many. One of the most well-known victims of the project was Frank Olson, who ultimately took his own life in 1953 by leaping from the 13th floor of a hotel room. Yet Olson was no ordinary man. He was a scientist specializing in biological weapons within the U.S. Army. His family later accused the CIA of assassinating him after he threatened to expose highly classified mind control programs. Some 40 years later, in 1994, Olson's body was exhumed and re-examined. The autopsy revealed signs of blunt force trauma inflicted prior to the fall, suggesting he was likely unconscious when thrown from the window. Even before that, in 1973, then CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of the MKUltra files in an attempt to cover up the operation. However, 2 years later, the Church Committee in the U.S. Senate uncovered several documents that had survived the purge. As a result, the U.S. Congress held hearings on the project, exposing its horrors and officially shutting it down. Nonetheless, it is widely believed that the MKUltra program, an infamous example of unethical mind control experiments, continues to this day under a different name, the Monarch Project, as it is known in conspiracy literature. This unofficial program represents a covert evolution of psychological programming, employing intense trauma and personality fragmentation to rebuild the human psyche in a way that allows remote manipulation by programmers. The core concept of the project suggests that when the mind endures severe and repeated trauma, it dissociates from reality, forming an alternate consciousness that is highly susceptible to implanted commands. The project takes its name from the monarch butterfly, a symbolic creature in psychological circles, representing the metamorphosis of consciousness triggered by trauma, just as a caterpillar transforms into a butterfly. This symbolic thread, linking butterflies, masks, and puppets, prompts many researchers to question whether a hidden language is being used to convey messages related to mind control through the media. In her widely known book Transformation of America, published in 1995 in collaboration with Mark Phillips, Kathy O'Brien claimed to have been a victim of Monarch programming. She recounted undergoing systematic torture and trauma-induced programming since childhood, designed to create a controllable alternate personality. Her testimony included the names of prominent American political and public figures allegedly involved in the program. While the Monarch Project straddles the blurred line between fact and fiction, lacking definitive proof, the abundance of testimonies and reports continues to arouse suspicion. In an era dominated by media manipulation, the concept of mind control, whether through harsh methods or subtle means, can no longer be dismissed as mere fantasy. Naturally, this brings us to a vast media manipulation network known as Project Mockingbird, also spearheaded by the Central Intelligence Agency. It was a secret operation aimed at dominating global media outlets and steering public opinion. Launched covertly in the late 1940s or early 1950s, at the height of the Cold War, the project marked a calculated effort by the CIA to weaponize journalism as a tool of psychological warfare against the Soviet Union and as a defensive measure against communist propaganda. This involved infiltrating major press institutions and influencing both American and global public sentiment. In 1977, investigative journalist Carl Bernstein, renowned for his role in uncovering the Watergate scandal, published an exposé containing documents and testimonies revealing that the CIA had been financially compensating over 400 journalists, either directly or indirectly collaborating with the agency. It had also recruited reporters and editors within major media corporations. Through meticulous research, American author and historian Alex Constantine exposed how U.S. intelligence transformed journalism into a conduit for state-sponsored propaganda. He illuminated the systemic manipulation of the media through covert operations, documenting the recruitment of journalists and the corruption of news institutions to serve political agendas. This manipulation extended far beyond printed journalism, infiltrating news agencies, books, documentaries, and even film and television, all of which were either shaped or subtly guided to reinforce the image of the United States while vilifying its adversaries. Prepackaged narratives were disseminated to justify governmental policies, such as biased coverage of the Vietnam War, suppression of U.S. activities in Cuba, and the promotion of misleading theories surrounding various coups, like the 1973 Chilean coup d'etat, among others. Although the term Mockingbird was never explicitly mentioned in the declassified documents revealed during the hearings of the U.S. Senate Church Committee, the investigations nonetheless pointed to a systematic effort to manage and direct media content. Following the scandal, the project was officially discontinued. Yet many experts believe it has since evolved into more sophisticated forms under the radar, designed to manipulate social media platforms, deploy artificial intelligence for targeted propaganda, and pressure major tech companies to curate internet content in a way that amplifies certain narratives while suppressing others. Thus, some governments and powerful entities continue to refine advanced mechanisms of public opinion control, exploiting AI algorithms to analyze users' personal data and behavioral patterns, then tailoring content that reinforces their political or economic agendas. Conversely, opposing views are either obscured or algorithmically downranked to limit their reach, ensuring that only a streamlined, ideologically shaped worldview gains traction. This strategy not only endangers freedom of expression, but also poses a serious threat to intellectual diversity and information transparency, effectively turning the internet into a controlled arena that promotes a singular narrative while marginalizing all others. As the world increasingly relies on digital platforms as primary sources of news and knowledge, technology emerges as a dominant force of media hegemony, one that secures the supremacy of those who wield it. So, can we still trust mainstream media? How many official narratives are nothing more than intricately programmed lies? Make no mistake, we have not strayed far from the core theme of forbidden technologies. All paths lead to the same destination, and it was essential to begin with projects aimed at direct or indirect mind control, media manipulation, and a restriction of intellectual freedom, all designed to mold collective consciousness. This strategy was distilled in a single line by George Orwell in his prophetic novel 1984. If they control what you see and hear, how can you know what is true? In any case, and despite the severity of the foregoing, let us now venture into even more dangerous territory: secret technologies shrouded in darkness. We begin with one of the most infamous programs in the realm of conspiracy lore, the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, HAARP. In the late 1980s, with funding from the U.S. Department of Defense and the University of Alaska Fairbanks, initial construction began on a research facility in Gakona, Alaska. It operated under the joint supervision of the U.S. Air Force and Navy in collaboration with the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA. By 1993, the site's infrastructure was complete and experimental operations commenced, with the official aim of studying the effects of high-frequency radio waves on the ionosphere, the uppermost layer of Earth's atmosphere, and its impact on both civilian and military communications. The broader goal was to improve long-range communication technologies and enhance missile early warning systems in the post-Cold War era. The project's main platform featured more than 180 antennas, collectively producing approximately 3.5 megawatts of high-frequency energy. Yet, in one way or another, HAARP was linked to a U.S. nuclear experiment from the 1960s known as Starfish Prime, part of the broader Dominic test series, which involved nuclear detonations in space. The Starfish Prime detonation caused significant disruption in Hawaii, including power outages and the destruction of wireless communication systems. Although the official rationale behind the Starfish Prime tests was to study the impact of nuclear weapons in space, later declassified documents revealed a more strategic motive: testing electromagnetic pulse (EMP) weapons intended to cripple Soviet communications in the event of nuclear war. Additionally, the entire Dominic series is viewed in conspiracy literature as a covert attempt to probe the so-called firmament dome. This historical linkage turned HAARP into a lightning rod for dozens of theories, many of which propose that the project's true aim is weather control. By heating specific regions of the upper atmosphere, HAARP is suspected of being able to trigger hurricanes, floods, droughts, or even earthquakes. The project's intense frequency emissions may stimulate tectonic shifts or produce unnatural weather anomalies, potentially accounting for the recent surge in extreme and unexplained climate events. It has also been associated with major seismic disasters, such as the 2010 Haiti earthquake, the 2023 Turkey earthquake, and the 2023 Morocco earthquake. Some have ventured even further, with certain sources alleging that the frequencies emitted by HAARP's antennas may be used to influence human brainwaves. Extremely low-frequency signals, it is claimed, can reach the brain through the atmosphere or via power lines, potentially enabling control over thoughts or inducing hallucinations, making HAARP a natural successor to the MKUltra project. However, according to the prevailing scientific narrative, such assertions remain speculative, lacking definitive proof. Electromagnetic effects capable of altering brain function, according to established studies, require radiation sources to be in extremely close proximity to the body, just a few centimeters away. If that's the case, then will the mobile phones we press against our heads during calls, are they not close enough to serve the same purpose? Could their rapid proliferation have played a role in the official shutdown of HAARP in 2014 and the subsequent transfer of its operations to the University of Alaska Fairbanks, which now claims to run it for purely academic and scientific purposes? Or so they say. The theory remains skeptical of this narrative, proposing instead that the project either evolved into a more sophisticated classified program or continues to operate under another guise. In their widely debated book Angels Don't Play This HAARP, published in 1995, researchers Nick Begich and Gene Manning unveiled a more unsettling perspective. HAARP, they argued, is not merely an academic research project but part of a clandestine plan to develop geophysical weapons inspired by the theories of Nikola Tesla. The true objective of the program, they claimed, goes far beyond studying the ionosphere. It includes orchestrating artificial climate disruptions. Later editions of the book introduced explosive updates, including testimonies about secret experiments in mind control through electromagnetic waves capable of altering neurological activity. They also warned that HAARP's technologies could be repurposed as weapons of mass destruction, able to disrupt global communications or trigger natural disasters aimed at entire nations. Though the book was met with derision by the scientific establishment, it remains a cornerstone for those questioning the official narrative, especially amid ongoing reports linking HAARP's technologies to covert military programs such as weather warfare and directed energy weapons. Speaking of Nikola Tesla, one cannot delve into secret technologies and controversial experiments without revisiting a legendary incident often seen as the progenitor of another major classified project, the Philadelphia experiment. In October of 1943, at the height of World War II, the U.S. Navy reportedly attempted to apply advanced theories of electromagnetism and optics to render a warship invisible to radar. Equipment based on unknown technology was installed aboard the USS Eldridge to generate an intense electromagnetic field meant to bend light around the vessel, effectively cloaking it. But what transpired allegedly surpassed all expectations. The ship did not merely vanish from radar. It disappeared entirely, only to reappear hours later at Norfolk Naval Base, hundreds of kilometers away, before returning to its original location in Philadelphia. In their 1979 book, The Philadelphia Experiment, Project Invisibility, Charles Berlitz and William Moore described chilling consequences for the crew. Some sailors reportedly became fused into the ship's metal, while others suffered severe psychological trauma or lost consciousness. There are even accounts claiming that certain individuals vanished permanently or briefly entered a phase of invisibility, an effect attributed to the vessel being transported into another dimension or parallel reality through the generated electromagnetic field. Although the U.S. Navy has officially denied conducting such an experiment, dismissing the entire story as conspiracy theory and arguing that the theoretical principles behind it, such as electromagnetic cloaking or space-time manipulation, remain speculative and impractical. Leaked documents and eyewitness accounts suggest otherwise. They point to the project being a part of a broader clandestine program to weaponize Tesla's technologies. Some reports even assert that Tesla himself contributed to the planning before his sudden death in 1943. But the story doesn't end there. Far from it. It is worth noting that what has been presented, and what is yet to come, is not mere science fiction or the delusions of conspiracy theorists, as some would have us believe. It is an investigative chronicle which, if not exposing a terrifying truth, at least raises urgent questions about the forces working tirelessly to shape human consciousness and steer the future. Not out of love for science or the betterment of humanity, but in pursuit of total control, seeking to command everything within reach to fulfill their grand design. Thus, the real question is no longer whether such a plan exists, but rather, how far along are they in executing it? And do we still have time to awaken? Or have we already crossed the point of no return?